If you've never been to the North Carolina Mountains, you wouldn't understand. The fog doesn't just roll in there. It settles, it waits, and sometimes it listens. This story begins in October of 1911, deep in the Appalachian Mountains of western North Carolina, in a logging town so small it didn't even have a name on most maps. The locals simply called it Black Hollow. 27 people lived there. By winter, only 11 remained, and all of them swore on their lives that Nathaniel Burke had come back from the dead. Nathaniel Burke was not a good man. He wasn't evil, at least not in the way stories usually describe evil. He didn't wear cruelty openly. He didn't threaten. He didn't shout. He simply stared. Too long. Too quiet. He was a trapper by trade. Lived alone in a small wooden cabin 2 miles north of Black Hollow, near the edge of a ravine. Locals refused to cross after sunset. People said strange sounds rose from that gorge at night. Not wolves, not wind. Something in between. Nathaniel had no family, no known past. He'd arrived 3 years earlier, claiming he'd come down from Virginia looking for work. No one could confirm it. No one questioned it. Back then, folks didn't dig too deep into things. That was their first mistake. The first disappearance was a hunter named Silas Moore. Silas had gone up the ridge one morning before dawn. He never returned. By evening, a search party formed. 6 men with lanterns and rifles. They found his rifle near the ravine, not broken, bent. The barrel twisted like soft metal. There were drag marks in the mud leading toward the gorge. And then nothing. No blood. No body. No prints. Nathaniel had joined the search. He'd said nothing. He'd stared into the ravine longer than anyone else. And he had smiled. After that, things changed in Black Hollow. Livestock went missing. Doors were found open in the mornings. Several residents claimed they heard scratching beneath their floors at night. Slow, deliberate scratching. 3 weeks after Silas disappeared, a young boy named Thomas Carter swore he saw Nathaniel standing in the woods behind his house at midnight. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was this. Thomas said Nathaniel wasn't standing on the ground. He was several feet above it, hovering, still, watching. When the boy screamed, the figure slipped backward into the trees without taking a step. No one believed him. Children imagined things. Until the next morning, when boot prints, Nathaniel's distinct square-toed boots, were found circling the Carter house in perfect silence. Then came the fire. Nathaniel's cabin burned down on November 3rd. The flames were seen from town just after midnight. By the time anyone reached it, the structure had collapsed inward. The smell wasn't just smoke. It was wrong. Too sweet, too thick. Inside the charred remains, they found bones. Human bones. Curled unnaturally, fused together in places. The town doctor confirmed it was Nathaniel, or at least it had been. No one asked too many questions. No one looked too closely. They buried what was left in the small hillside cemetery at the edge of town. No ceremony, no prayers, just relief. Black Hollow slept easier that night, for 3 days. On the 4th night, Martha Ellis heard knocking at her door. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 slow knocks. She assumed it was her husband, returning late from the lumber yard. She lit a lantern and opened the door. No one stood there. But something had been, because in the dirt just beyond her porch were boot prints. Square, toed, fresh, away from the house. Not toward it. The next morning, the grave was open, the soil disturbed, the wooden coffin splintered from the inside, and Nathaniel Burke's body was gone. There were no drag marks, no footprints leaving the cemetery. Just one thing carved into the soft dirt at the head of the grave. 3 lines, parallel, deep, as if something with long fingers had pressed into the earth. That same night, 11 residents reported seeing a lantern moving in the woods north of town. It floated. No visible hand holding it. Just a dim orange glow weaving through the trees, toward the ravine, toward Nathaniel's old cabin, or what remained of it. By dawn, something new stood there. Not the burned cabin, but something built from the remains. Twisted wood, bent beams, stacked in ways no carpenter would ever design, and hanging from the doorway, animal bones, and something else, cloth, human cloth. Sheriff Alden Mercer rode up that afternoon with 2 deputies. They approached the structure cautiously, rifles raised. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, it was cold. Unnaturally cold. Frost clung to the inside walls, despite it being only early November. And in the center of the room, sitting calmly in a wooden chair, was Nathaniel Burke. His skin was pale gray, his eyes too dark, his neck twisted slightly to one side, as if it had never set properly after breaking. But he was smiling. The sheriff swore, later. Nathaniel spoke without moving his mouth. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. You buried me wrong. Harris fired first. 3 shots. Center mass. Nathaniel did not fall. Instead, he stood, slowly, and the temperature dropped so fast the deputies' breath crystallized mid-air. The sheriff ordered retreat. They ran. Behind them, laughter echoed from the structure. Low. Not entirely human. By morning, Deputy Harris was gone. His horse returned riderless, the saddle soaked in something dark. They found Harris 2 days later at the base of the ravine, alive. Barely. His eyes had turned completely white. He could still speak. But only one sentence. Over and over again. He's not in the ground anymore. He died before sunset. No wounds. No blood. Just empty. The town gathered in the church that night. Preacher Willoughby led a prayer circle. He believed it was demonic. Some believed it was mountain witchcraft. Old. Mrs. Harlan whispered something older than both. She claimed her grandmother once told her about the taken ones, people who die in the mountains before their time, people the earth does not accept, people who come back, hollow. 3 more vanished before the week ended. Each house left undisturbed. No struggle. No blood. Just one thing found at every doorstep. 3 deep scratches in the wood. Parallel. Perfect. Snow came early that year. Heavy. Thick. It buried Black Hollow in silence. And silence is dangerous in the mountains, because you can hear things better. Like footsteps outside your window, when no one should be walking. Like breathing beneath your floorboards, when you live alone, and like your name whispered from the tree line, in a voice that almost sounds familiar. Almost. On December 12th, Martha Ellis made the mistake of answering the knock again. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 slow knocks. This time, she did not open the door. She asked who was there. A pause. Then, her husband's voice replied, "Martha, it's cold." But her husband had died 5 years earlier. Buried in that same cemetery. She did not open the door. The knocking continued until sunrise, when she finally looked outside. There were no footprints in the snow, except one set leading from the forest, stopping at her door, and then leading straight up her wall, onto the roof. By Christmas Eve, the town decided to leave. 11 survivors packed wagons. They would head south at first light. The mountains could keep their secrets. They just wanted to live. That night, they gathered in the church, one last time. For safety, for warmth, for numbers. The wind howled outside. The candles flickered. And just after midnight, the church doors opened on their own. Snow blew inward, and standing in the doorway was Nathaniel Burke, not burned, not broken, perfectly still, perfectly upright. Behind him, shapes moved in the snow, tall, crooked, too many joints. Watching, waiting, Nathaniel tilted his head, and this time, he moved his mouth. "You should have come with me the first time." The candles went out, all of them, at once. The screaming lasted less than a minute. When travelers passed through Black Hollow in the spring of 1912, they found the town abandoned, wagons still packed, food still stored, church doors hanging open, no bodies, no blood, just 11 sets of footprints in the snow, preserved beneath ice. Leading north, toward the ravine, and stopping at its edge, as if they had all stepped forward together. The town never appeared on maps again. But hunters in western North Carolina still talk about a ravine where the forest grows wrong, where trees bend inward, where frost clings to the ground even in summer. And sometimes, if you camp too close, you'll hear 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 slow knocks. And a voice that sounds almost human. Almost. They never found the bodies. That's the part the newspapers left out. In April of 1912, when a pair of railroad surveyors passed through what used to be Black Hollow, they reported the town abandoned but intact. Food still in barrels, beds still made, horses still tied in skeletal remains near the church. But no people. The sheriff's office from Asheville dismissed it as mass hysteria. They blamed harsh winter conditions, claimed the townsfolk likely tried to cross the mountains and froze. But here's what never made print. The snow around the church that night had recorded everything. 11 sets of footprints left the building. None returned, and there were no signs of struggle, no scattered tracks, no drag marks, just 11 calm, deliberate paths heading north, toward the ravine. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand something about the Appalachian Mountains. They are older than bones, older than the Atlantic Ocean, older than trees. And according to Cherokee folklore, certain places in those mountains were never meant for settlement. The people who lived there long before 1911 believed some hollows were thin, places where the world above and whatever lies beneath pressed too closely together. The ravine north of Black Hollow was one of those places. Locals once called it the throat. because sound traveled differently there. It's wood, it's a year. You could whisper at its edge and hear your voice return, not as an echo, but as something altered, adjusted, like it had learned how to pronounce your name. Nathaniel Burke had chosen his cabin carefully. That wasn't coincidence. He had arrived in black, hollow 3 years before the disappearances began. Claimed he came from Virginia. Claimed he'd lost family to fever. But no one ever confirmed a single detail about him. After the fire, when Sheriff Mercer's records were re-examined, they found something strange. There was no birth certificate, no property record prior to his arrival, no tax history. It was as if Nathaniel Burke simply began the day he walked into town. And something else. The bones found in the fire, the ones identified as his, they were too many. The town doctor had quietly noted that detail. There were fragments belonging to at least 3 different individuals, but he never told anyone. Fear has a way of sealing mouths. On Christmas Eve, inside that church, when Nathaniel stepped through the doors and the candles died, something else entered with him. The survivors never screamed long because they weren't attacked. They were invited. That's what Martha Ellis understood too late. The thing wearing Nathaniel's body wasn't hunting. It was gathering. The preacher, Willoughby, was the only one who tried to resist. When the cold flooded the church, frost formed across the pews. He raised his Bible and shouted scripture. Witnesses, before they disappeared, had said Nathaniel smiled wider at that. Not in anger, in recognition, because whatever stood in that doorway was older than the book in the preacher's hand, older than the church, older than belief itself. What happened next was pieced together years later from something found at the Ravine, a journal, half buried beneath rock and ice. The leather cover bore Martha Ellis's name. The final entries were written in shaking ink. December 24th, 1911. He says we buried him wrong. He says the mountain does not return what it takes. He says we are hollow too. The entry continues. Martha wrote that when the candles extinguished, the church walls seemed to stretch taller, the ceiling bending upward into darkness that wasn't there before. The doorway behind Nathaniel no longer showed snow. It showed trees. Wrong trees. Bent inward, branches twisted like ribs, and beyond them, a red glow, not fire. Something breathing. Nathaniel stepped aside, and the shapes in the snow entered. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with limbs that bent backward at the knees. Their joints popped softly when they moved. Their heads tilted too far to the side, and their skin was bark, split in places to reveal something darker beneath. They did not attack. They circled, watching, waiting. Nathaniel spoke only once. The earth does not like emptiness. Then he pointed north. And the church doors widened further than their hinges should allow. The wind pulled inward instead of pushing out. And, one by one, the townspeople walked, dragged, not forced, walked, as if sleepwalking, as if answering something they had always known was calling. Martha wrote that, when it was her turn to step outside, she looked back once. The church was gone. In its place stood trees, thick, crowded. The town had already begun to disappear. The journal ends at the edge of the ravine. The final line reads, "We are not being taken. We are being replaced." When searchers descended into the ravine months later, they found something impossible. The gorge was deeper than any map recorded, almost unnaturally so, as if it had stretched. At its base was a clearing untouched by snow, warm, breathing mist, and in the center, 11 trees, perfectly spaced in a circle, their trunks pale, their bark smoother than the others. When one searcher pressed his hand against one of them, he recoiled instantly. The surface was warm and faintly soft, like skin stretched too tight. They cut one down, against better judgment. The inside was not wood. It was layered, fibrous, and beneath the inner rings, they found fabric. A piece of Martha Ellis's dress, embedded, fused. They burned the clearing, or tried to. The fire would not hold. The wood would not catch. The smoke bent downward instead of rising. By nightfall, the search party fled. 3 of them resigned the following week. One moved west and never spoke of North Carolina again. And Sheriff Mercer. He shot himself the following spring. Left behind a single sentence in his office ledger. He is not a man. For decades, no one settled Black Hollow again. The forest reclaimed it, but hikers in the 1930s reported strange formations near the ravine. 11 trees, always 11, even after storms. Even after lightning strikes, always 11. A 12th, small at first, sapling-sized, as if something new had joined them. Local legend now speaks of the taken ones, spirits that don't haunt houses. They haunt soil. They wait beneath roots. They call softly at night. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 slow knocks. The pattern isn't random. It's the rhythm of a heartbeat, slowed, stretched, mountain timed. But here's the part that makes this story linger. In 1974, a group of college students camping near that same ravine disappeared. Their tent was found intact, their supplies untouched. No bodies, no blood, just 11 trees in the clearing, and one fresh stump, still leaking sap. The Park Service closed the area shortly after, officially for unstable terrain. Unofficially, rangers reported hearing whispers while patrolling the perimeter. Not wind, not animals, voices, layered, like many people trying to speak through the same mouth, and occasionally, a single voice rising above the others. Calm, measured, familiar. You buried me wrong. Some researchers believe Nathaniel Burke was never resurrected because he was never human to begin with. He didn't come back from the mountain. He came out of it. A scout, a hollow shape wearing borrowed flesh, testing, learning, waiting for enough emptiness to open the throat. And when the town gathered in fear, when they filled the church with desperation, they created exactly what the mountain needed. 11 hollow vessels, ready to root. To this day, satellite imagery of that region shows something strange. In the dead of winter, when frost covers everything, one patch remains untouched. A small circular clearing, warmer than the surrounding forest. Always. Count the trees carefully if you ever go looking. If there are 11, leave. If there are 12, run. Because the mountain is still replacing what it takes. And sometimes, if you stand at the edge of a deep Appalachian ravine after dark, you might hear it. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 slow knocks. And if you listen closely, you may hear your own voice answering back. From below.